Welcome back. This is a short series of videos where I am analyzing a set of traits in the role-playing game GURPS, 4th edition, the generic universal role-playing system. And my goal here is to take the really great and nuanced and expressive character creation system and take all the many different traits relating to sensory abilities, like to extend your hearing with subsonic hearing, or maybe a very discriminatory sort of hearing, where you get to really pick out really nuanced details with your hearing, or adding in infravision to your vision, and trying to go back and represent a basic, adding a new sense to your character with a single overarching advantage, a single overarching trait that you can add to a character and build your own sense from scratch. GURPS already has the detect advantage built into the basic set, and the detect advantage is what I'm building this new sensory ability out of. And I've got some thoughts here. I'll show you a couple pages of my thoughts that I've been going through. So here's kind of a summation where I'm thinking about what is detect, what does the detect advantage do, what are its modifiers, in a sense, what are the components of seeing and hearing, and thinking about pathways, thinking about maybe we should be thinking about the sensory advantage in terms of this thing travels through everything. It's a cosmic pathway, or it travels, like I might be able to sense gold in the earth, right? It would be a cosmic pathway. Or it travels through space, like light does. Or it travels through some sort of substance or media, like sound does. I was thinking about range, I was thinking about the spatial details, thinking about the analytical detail, and I was thinking about the sensory arc, and I was trying to figure out what the sensory arc was in GURPS. I found out that there's actually not a single concise graphic in the basic set. I thought there was, but there's not a concise graphic in the basic set to describe the average, the typical, the assumed sensory arc. Instead, it shows graphics for departures from that sensory arc, and in some places it describes what that normal sensory arc is, but there's not actually a depiction of it. So I had to kind of figure that out and figure out what the angles are if I want to think about sensory arc. I thought about how much bad sight costs. This is near vision or far vision. I am personally nearsighted, right? Got my glasses. So I would have the bad sight disadvantage myself. As well as thinking about expansions with infravision. And anyway, this was a bit of a mess. This is just me kind of thinking it through, and this is another page of me thinking it through, and I think this is the one that I actually want to share here. And I'll start up here by saying that sense is detect. Let's just use the detect advantage as our base and just go from there. An active sense, which is like a dark vision, for example, or echolocation, would be an active sense is sense, but paired with the signal advantage that's found in the template toolkit too. We'll come back to that one, so we won't worry about active senses here. That's not going to be represented this advantage. But if you want an active sense, I'm going to represent it as a pairing of signal with a sense. That way you'd be able to see where there's otherwise no stimuli for you to, for you to detect a signal and be able to gain awareness of your surroundings or whatever. First change I make is that sense is based on a perception roll, not an IQ roll. The detect advantage is based on you roll your intelligence score. I guess the idea there is that it would be like it's this sort of sixth, the sixth sense that you have of whatever phenomenon it is that you're detecting. The default is kind of like detecting gold, or oh, I sense that there's life nearby, or things like that. So that always seemed kind of weird to me. That was based on intelligence rather than on perception. Perception is derived from your intelligence score. In GURPS, perception is a perception is a component of your intelligence in the sense that your intelligence includes your ability to take in information and make sense of the world around you. It's part of what intelligence is. I'm just going to shove all of that over onto the perception secondary characteristic. I did make a note here. Why was detect ever not perception based? This is my personal opinion. Creators of GURPS may differ. There may be some forum post somewhere about that. I don't know. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that. And I kept here the same point values here for detect. So there's detecting a rare substance or phenomenon, occasional, a common, or a very common. And I adjusted this very common to be very common or ubiquitous. So for example, if you could detect, and I'm also thinking about phenomena in terms of fields, like the light field or in an acoustic sound field, right? So so I'm going to place those in here. So here I'd say a ubiquitous field, something that is absolutely everywhere, would be gravity. Gravity really doesn't have any barriers, not that I know of anyway. I'm not a physicist, but I'm pretty sure nothing really stops gravity. You always just feel it. It's a warp in space-time, right? Um, maybe even time itself would be a ubiquitous phenomenon. Changes, alterations in the time field might not be so ubiquitous though, right? So in which case you'd go up in rarity. I'm going to include visible light in common phenomena. Not ubiquitous because after all, there are caves, there are underground areas, there are buildings, there are many places where light is blocked out. If not for that, it would more or less be ubiquitous. Sound as even, I'm changing, instead of that being common, I'm moving that to occasional. We always have sound around us, right? But sound, whereas light, for us, our experience anyway, is that light is more or less always there. The sun always brings it every day. Sound has to be made by something generally, right? Well, not generally. It always has to be made by something. Light always has to be made by something too, but sound is a little bit more local creation. And it depends on, like, it can be blocked by, like, light can be blocked by walls, sound can be blocked by walls and by water or muffled by water. There's all kinds of things that can affect or distort sound, more so than light. So also as I'm going up rarity, I'm also thinking about what serves as a barrier to that phenomenon that you're detecting. So anyway, so that's the base value is exactly how the detect advantage is already described in the basic set, with the consideration of fields like light and sound and gravity. All right, so this is the value that's given, and the way the detect advantage is written is you have to actively concentrate to detect the thing. And when you do, if you're successful in your detection attempt, in this case it would be perception, but again in the base rules I think you roll IQ for that, your intelligence score for that. Then you get the direction and you get some qualitative amount. It says it does say quantity, but some vague notion of the quantity, right? You have an idea if there's a lot or a little or a trace amount, right? And then with further effort, you can make another roll to then analyze the details of the thing. So, somewhere, I couldn't quite remember where this was recorded or introduced. It might be in the Powers book, but there's an analytical modifier to this, which doubles the value. It's plus 100% of the value. That allows you to analyze it for free. And basically every sense that we have, vision, hearing, smell, touch, is one, it's always on, and two, we're always analyzing. Maybe with smell, you could argue that we're not automatically analyzing it. You got to like kind of think about it. You're like, oh, that smells funny. What am I smelling? Right? You got to spend some time to actually analyze what the smell is. And same with touch. You got to like actually rub the thing. Feel the texture, see if there's any bumps. To analyze what you're touching. So that might be true of those senses. But for hearing and vision, that analysis is always on, and that detection is always on. So that's something that'll come up here in a bit. For the detective end, you can get the precise modifier, which is another plus 100% to its value. In which case you also get distance. For minus 50%, you get is vague, in which case you only detect the presence, and you can't generally only detect the presence, and you can't analyze it. So that's actually two parts here. There's a detection part and an analytical part, and I'm going to separate those. I also wrote down here, consider always on, consider whether the part is targetable, consider whether, the values for the limited arc, which I actually figured that out down here, or at least a proposal for that all the way down here. Sorry, I realize the page isn't always on the screen. And then there's the resolution of it. And this one I decided to break out into 4 categories. Can you only detect its presence, which is the current vague modifier? Only its direction, which is its kind of vanilla capability. Can you detect distance? I call that ranging here. That's the precise modifier, plus 100%. I went one further to imaging. Can you get details about the object's shape, the patterns on the object, things like that? So that would be this imaging, and I made that a plus 200% here. And then in addition to the resolution, there's the analytical detail that you can pull out of it. So the levels I chose here are the discriminatory, basic, which is you can get analysis with a roll, with some effort, and then rudimentary is you get detection only without analysis. So this is where I took that vague. Vague is minus 50%. Here I broke it out into the rudimentary and the only detecting presence part, so 25% a piece. For now, again, this is still just a draft. I'm figuring this out. And then also considering what an extended range looks like. So let's just add on another 10%. If, for example, for vision, we wanted to add infravision onto that, or radio vision. This was kind of funny, actually. So in the basic set for detect under rare, it lists as an example detecting radar or radio. That seemed very funny to me because radar is radar is basically detecting radio waves. So anyway, so I think they're actually in they cover the same spectrum of light, the same range of light. It's quite a broad and wide range of the electromagnetic spectrum. But anyway, I digress. So I'm removing radar out of there entirely because it's really just radio. Someone who's smarter than me can chip into the comments and correct me. But anyway, so this is kind of the framework that I laid out for now and what I wanted to talk about and present today. This might be the last I work on it for a little bit. I'm pretty happy with this, although the numbers I came out with, my goal is to kind of reach the same sort of number, the values, as GURPS already presents in its advantages and disadvantages. Especially since we have a value for vision, because the blindness disadvantage, taking away your vision, is worth minus 50 points. Deafness, taking away your hearing, is worth 20 points. Being unable to smell, no sense of smell or taste, is worth minus 5 points. So we know the value of these senses. However, when you use detect, they all become overstated, overvalued, I guess. They're all going to end up being more than what you anticipate. So anyway, I worked out an old version down here. We're going to ignore that. And this in very tiny print is kind of what I did. So I might pull down my phone here. Can I just lower that for a minute? And I'll see if I can pull this up. And yeah, so here I said vision would be detecting light, which I said is a common phenomenon. It's detecting light, and it has the modifiers I indicated above. It's you can our vision, human vision, the standard GURPS vision, is imaging. It's discriminatory, meaning that we can tease apart lots of different details in every part that we see, color specifically. Right, we get the red, green, and blue channels in our eyeballs, and we can extend that, of course, with the extended modifier. But this is just the vanilla one. So anyway, imaging. This is a discriminatory sense. If your character was colorblind, you would cut this out, which, by the way, would be worth minus 10 points. I'll need to remind myself how much the colorblind disadvantage costs. But anyway, so imaging, discriminatory, has a limited arc of 120 degrees plus a 60-degree peripheral. That's 30 degrees on either side for a total of minus 35. It's always on. It's always analyzing, and your eyeballs are targetable at minus 9 to hit. And that came out to be a total of not 50 but 89 points. So a little, like I said, it's I think using detect as a framework is going to generally overvalue all of these, or all of these numbers just need to change, and I need to iterate on this, or maybe there's an entirely different way to approach this problem, which is fine. Again, this whole exercise is just to have fun and to explore GURPS as a system, and especially to look for opportunities to see if I can make GURPS even more, as its name says, generic. It's the generic universal role-playing system. And I'd love to make some things a little bit more generic and universal. Yeah, so we're just having fun here. If you see an opportunity to change and to improve on what I've done, by all means, please leave a comment. I did this also for hearing, smell, and touch. So hearing, for smell, this would be touch. Sorry, not smell. Smell would be smell and taste. GURPS lumps those together into just the sort of olfactory sense. So for hearing, I have this is the detect sound or acoustic waves or whatever you want to call it. That is, I said that would be 10 points for an occasional phenomenon, or a phenomenon that is common but is fairly easy to block or muffle. Anyway, for that I gave it ranging. With our ears, we can more or less tell how far away the thing is that we're hearing. It's not as perfect as our eyesight, but we get a sense of whether something's near or far away, typically. It's always on and it's always analyzing, and that came out as 34 points. Again, more than the 20, but anyway. For smell, this is detect sense. I gave this one an occasional phenomenon, just like the hearing. I wrote down presence only, although I don't really remember what I was thinking when I wrote that down. Anyway, oh no, presence only. That's this resolution, right? Whether it's imaging, ranging, detect direction, or you could only detect whether it's present or not. So here it's just detecting its presence. You can't really use it to tell the direction of anything. Our sense of smell isn't good for that. Not for humans anyway. I kept it as the basic, so you'd still be able to analyze what you smell, but with the roll. And it's always on. You're always smelling. You don't need to make a roll to have smelled something, but you do need to make a roll to go ahead and analyze and identify what that smell is. Okay. And then finally touch, this would be detect of solid objects. I could say solid objects and temperature would be that's really what I mean here, but either way, it's a kind of a very common or ubiquitous thing, or you're always going to be encountering solid objects. Here I applied the melee attack modifier for close reach for minus 30%. It just seemed appropriate to apply here. It's also always on. We are always feeling. And that came out to be 33. So by comparison, for vision, that should have been 50. I came up with 89. Hearing should have been 20, came up with 34. Smell should have been 5, came up with 12. And touch, the numb disadvantage is worth minus 20, and this is 33. So overall, not too bad. I think I'm over on all of these by a little bit more than 50%, which isn't too bad for an early attempt at trying to figure this out and trying to collect all these sensory notions into one advantage here. Of course, the idea here is also to replace things like I can't remember what it's called, telecommunications, because telecommunications is really about sending a signal and being able to detect it. So these pair of advantages will also replace that capability, and the signal will be fairly narrowband, and the ability to detect it will also be fairly narrowband. So overall, those two things together are going to not have a huge point value, which should be fairly well in line with the telecommunication advantage. Anyway, so that's what I've come up with so far. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. If something obvious that I missed, there's more to do. There's always more analysis to do. For example, this does not account for penetrating vision, right? It doesn't account for night vision, which you could extend to other senses to be, well, in the absence of a lot of whatever you detect, for example, light, you'd still, if you had penalties on your sensory roll to detect it, it would mitigate that penalty, which is exactly what the night vision advantage does. I also didn't include any protected sense component in here. Protected sense might just stay as its own separate advantage. So at 5 points per sense, that sounds fine. Anyway, there's probably other things that I missed here, and that will come up. But yeah, that list I made up in the previous video was absolutely huge, absolutely enormous. And a lot of those, and I can write this up into a more kind of paragraph, formal way. This is all just kind of scratches and notes. So anyway, thank you for joining me on my creative journey. If you'd like to continue to receive updates from me, feel free to go ahead and like the video and subscribe. I always hope that your creative journey is treating you well. Let me know how it's going in the comments below. And I guess that's it. Have yourself a lovely day.